Well, good afternoon, folks. This is Ron Gallagher with the Pennsylvania Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, along with Sam Marshall of the Insurance Federation of Pennsylvania, bringing you the call-in show with the insurance department. We're waiting for more attendees to sign in. We have about 400 people registered, and there's about 100 folks that have already signed in. So we're just going to wait another minute or so. Okay. As folks are still coming in, this is Ron again. I just have some quick opening remarks, and then I'll turn it over to Mike Humphreys, the Chief of Staff at the Insurance Department, and then we'll end it with any closing comments by Sam Marshall. The first thing is I want to say thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your schedules. This is the first call we've had with the Insurance Department in 2 weeks. So there are some things that I know Mike Humphreys will be talking about. Our next call is scheduled for June 15th, so 2 weeks from now as well. After that, we're going to go on an as-needed basis as developments occur. So we could be on a different schedule moving forward. If anybody in the audience today has any questions, please use the Q&A function that you can find on the Zoom web page there. You just click it, and you can submit your question to us. With that, I want to just say thank you once again to the Insurance Department for taking time out of their schedules. You know, we have all the senior managers of the department sitting on this call to help respond to whatever questions that are out there. And with that, Mike, I want to turn it over to you. It's Mike Humphreys, Chief of Staff at the Pennsylvania Insurance Department. Welcome, Mike.
Sure. Thank you, Ron and Sam, for holding this meeting today. We recognize it's been a couple of weeks since we met last, so there are a few agenda items that we wanted to talk about today to provide updates that we think will be important to your members. It's again a little bit of a shorter agenda, so to the extent that you have questions, I'll encourage you to post those questions in the chat box or start doing that now. And I meant the Q&A box, not the chat box. So we have a queue ready for when we're winding down, because we have about 4 or 5 items that we wanted to move right into. So appreciate everyone being available in joining us today after what was a challenging weekend for many of us here in Pennsylvania and across the country. So just jumping right into the first item that we wanted to talk about was the reopening Pennsylvania plan. And in general, as many of you know, we have been following a staged reopening plan that relies on, or staggered reopening plan that relies on metrics to open up counties specifically. And we have now, as of the end of this week, by June 5th, all of the counties across the Commonwealth will at least be up to yellow, where we still have a number that are in red today. And we have started to transition over to the green phase. And what I think is most important for you all is that even in green and certainly yellow, the guidance calls for continuing to follow CDC and DOH guidance for social distancing and cleaning, including having those entering the office wear masks, and for those areas that are open to the public, create opportunities for distancing there, while also cleansing heavy traffic areas. One other item that we wanted to focus on as part of that guidance is teleworking. Even while moving into green, telework does continue to remain strongly encouraged. For us at the department, we are continuing to telework through the yellow stage here in Dauphin County. And we expect to even telework once we get to green, as we have found that we have been able to maintain the services that we had been providing in a telework environment. Obviously, as you all know, it was a challenge at the beginning to get everyone situated to go out, and a fairly significant learning curve, but I think we've hit our groove in terms of understanding how the schedule is changed a little bit, but how we can access and provide the services through our teleworking experience. And one other point that I would highlight, yellow generally means operating up to 50% capacity in the office. Green increases that to approximately 75% of capacity, to the extent that people need to be in the office, again, as I mentioned. One other piece related to reopening that we wanted to focus on a little bit here, because I think the last time we talked, we were probably at the very beginning of counties moving over to yellow. But I wanted to turn over to Chris Monahan to talk a little bit about guidance, particularly for agents and agencies as we transition to yellow and green. So, Chris?
Thanks, Mike. So a few weeks ago, we issued notice and distributed to our licensees and to our stakeholders about what yellow phase meant for our licensees operating in the market. Now, when we have counties moving to green phase or that have already moved into green phase, we will be distributing updated guidance or new guidance on green phase. So basically what you'll see, and we should get this notice and this guidance out this week for everybody to look at. But basically, again, like what Mike said, telework and remote operations are still strongly encouraged even in the green phase counties. But insurance licensees are permitted to conduct in-person operations, including in-person sales, as long as they follow the CDC and the Department of Health guidelines and the governor's guidance that Mike had previously referenced. In-person business really should be, we're strongly advising to be conducted by appointment only wherever possible when operating in the green phase. So there is a little bit more opening up under green phase where sales is permitted, in-person business is permitted, as long as you follow the guidelines and really do stress and look at the telework and remote operations as the first options before doing any sort of in-person sales or in-person business. So like I said, the green phase guidance should be out. I'll make sure to distribute that to our stakeholders, and then it will be posted on our website. It will be on our resource accounts for responses when someone either calls into the department or emails us. The green phase guidance should be out there in the next day or two. Thank you.
And Chris, just staying with you, we'll roll into just generally some of the updates that we have in terms of producer licensing and the testing opportunities that are going to be open.
Sure. So in terms of testing facilities, we first started to reopen some of our testing facilities had been closed for weeks while counties were in red phase, but as some counties moved to yellow phase a few weeks ago, we began reopening testing facilities. We obviously had temporary licensing up and running during the time period where testing centers were completely shut down. We still have temp licensing up and running right now as an option because there are still certain counties that are in red phase, or there are certain applicants who don't feel comfortable coming into testing centers yet. But we currently have 5 facilities open in Pennsylvania, and then anticipating that the rest of the counties will go yellow later this week. The rest of our testing facilities will reopen no later than Friday or Monday, so that all testing centers will be available for testing, and by appointment, you can get in and begin doing that. Additionally, come July 1st, for the first time ever in Pennsylvania, we will have remote testing available for all lines of authority. So come July 1, we will have a third option, and we will leave temporary licensing up and running until at least the remote testing is up and running smoothly. So we'll have 3 different options available, at least for a period of time, for people who are looking to get licensed at this time.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Next agenda item that we wanted to provide an update on relate to rate and form filings, both in terms of paybacks and then newer filings that we've been seeing. So I'll turn it over to Shannon and John Lates.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This is Shannon. So just wanted to first recognize and appreciate the many insurers who have been returning excess premiums for personal auto, commercial auto, and business insurance policies over the past couple of months. They've seen reduced claims experience and exposure on their vehicles as they're being driven less, and the businesses have been closed or working in a reduced capacity. So we want to first thank them and appreciate what they've done. Most of the premium relief, credit, or dividend programs, though, have been temporary reductions, generally set to end when the state executive order ends or in a 1 to 3 month time period. Recently, we've actually seen some more filings come in. Now, typically when the rate changes are submitted, they take into consideration historical loss experience, which would now be all the way through from December 31st, 2019. However, we've noticed that some rate filings that are not temporary credit programs, but instead are taking into account the current pandemic and filing for reduced rates for their new and renewal businesses. That's what we would expect. I will say though that we are starting to get some insurers who are submitting rate increases at this time, still looking back in 2019, sometimes even 2018. And though that's a typical and normal experience that we would look at, we are in a time that is far from typical. So given how significant the claims data has changed in the past couple of months, we're actually asking insurers to include a pandemic impact analysis. It's nothing formal, just an analysis that can be quantitative or qualitative or both, but at least it's looking at what should be included from an expected losses based on the pandemic and what they've seen in their most current experience. Without the additional analysis for us to understand why the rate increases are needed. And of course, this applies to the types of insurance that are impacted by the pandemic, but we're actually objecting to rate increase filings if we don't have a good understanding for why the most current information is not being considered. And don't forget that Pennsylvania actually offers insurers the option to do a file and use reduction. So that's that Title 31, Chapter 130, the file and use provision to submit a rate filing reduction that's up to 10%. By type of insurance. The reduced rates would be in effect for 90 days or more, but after 90 days, the insurer could actually withdraw the filing as needed. So hopefully it's an easier solution than filing premium relief programs, especially if you're doing it on a monthly basis. This would definitely be something that you could use. It'd be in effect for 90 days and then you could withdraw it. Anything, John, that you had to add?
The only thing I would add is I know we issued guidance when we first came out, when our offices were first shut down on, holding back non-essential filings and only filing, things that are time critical. We're back up, we have no issue approving filings or reviewing filings. So I would just encourage folks that if you've been holding back on certain filings, that you can go ahead and consider submitting those to us. And I am working with Shannon. Hopefully we'll have some guidance out there just to make it clear that, Pennsylvania's open for business. We're looking at filings, we're reviewing things. And so, carry on as normal.
Thank you both. And just as a reminder, there's just a couple of shorter agenda items remaining. So if you have questions, you may want to start putting them in now. On the financial filings front, today is June 1st. There's a number of due dates today. Wanted to turn it over to Joe.
Thanks, Mike. I just want to give an update in terms of what has been requested to date. The current tally for requests for extensions for letters of qualification and exams reports is 36, of which 17 are from continuing care retirement communities. For corporate governance annual disclosure requests, It's less than 10, but we did get some in late Friday afternoon that are not included in the 10, but we think there's probably still less than 15 overall requests for extensions. We've had 2 requests for extensions of first quarter statements. And the other requests that we have received are for holding company filings, such as the ultimate controlling person financials, Form B registration statements, and Form F enterprise risk management statements. And that's it.
Very good. Thanks, Joe. And the last item that wanted to remind everyone of that's actually has a June 1 due date is the business interruption data call through the NAIC. So the first part of that is due today with the exposure information. And though claims and loss information, kind of part 2 of the data call, is due 2 weeks from today. So you should have received that data request at this point, obviously a couple of weeks ago. I think right around the time we had our last call was when it went out, if I remember correctly, that same Monday. So just as a reminder, that was is due this afternoon. So that is all we have in terms of the prepared agenda items that we have. So I'll start turning it over to the questions and encourage you to add to that list. We have 3 open right now, so I'll try to work through those and any others that we get between now and that. The first question is to the PID, what lessons learned about working in a remote environment, especially with online services, you see that will continue after the pandemic ends? Is there a statewide forum where the industry can send additional ideas and concepts for online services? This is a great question, and it's one that we're exploring in a number of different ways. In several respects, we're looking at different opportunities for electronic processes where today is very paper-based. One of those areas on the company licensing side that we're looking at is opening up the use of opt-ins to do simple company transactions or to make those payments electronic through the opt-in system, which is one that is administered through the NAIC. A number of you already pay premium taxes in a number of other states using the opt-in system. So it's one that the vast majority of our market already has familiarity with and can pay through. So that's one thing that we're trying to explore is just another option because we recognize just like it's difficult for you to necessarily pull together the right people, even just to send a paper check. Paper checks hit a number of different areas at the department. So to the extent that we can move in an electronic manner, I think that creates some efficiencies. And we're also looking at what other electronic systems may be available or enhancements that we can make to go more electronic. I think you heard Chris talk about earlier this meeting, the ability for producers to complete their testing electronic is another benefit that we can provide to all of our customers in terms of those that are looking to be licensed and take those tests here at the department or for the department's licensing purposes. With that, I'll actually also open it up to any of the deputies who wanted to share any particular lessons that they thought was helpful or that they're looking at and considering here at the department. Anybody has any thoughts?
So this is Chris. Another thing that we had difficulty with in the beginning when we first went to remote work was the ability to send licensing renewals for producers, because we had always had to print those and stuff them in envelopes and mail them, but we had no ability to get into the office to do that. And so we began doing electronic renewals using email addresses for our producers. And we've had a lot of success with that over the past 2.5 months. Not only do the producers seem to like getting the electronic renewal notices and the ability to renew electronically, but it saves us a lot of time and money in having to print and stuff envelopes. So that is something we look to further refine and use moving forward. And the other thing is the appointment billings for insurance companies have always been printed and mailed and then required paper checks to come in. And we're working on making that an automated process as well, as a result of trying to figure out a way to get around some of our limitations with the whole COVID-19 issue.
Any other deputies want to share any thoughts they had? Okay, then I will move on to the next question is, when Harrisburg goes green, will the department resume in-person meetings with insurers at the square, or will you continue to push for calls for the foreseeable future? I think that's probably a little of both, but primarily, at least for the foreseeable future, I think the majority of our calls are going to be electronic, or a lot of our meetings will be electronic via webinar. At some point, yes, we will be back in the office and we will be resuming in-person meetings at that time, compliant with how DOH and or the CDC recommends that these meetings take place. As you know, a number of these meetings are fewer than 10 people. Some get above that. So in terms of simple spacing at Strawberry Square and masking, and we may have fewer people participate in those meetings once we get to in person. But for us, I think right now, that is in the distant future, as we do anticipate being fully electronic for at least the next several weeks. Next question. Many insurance departments have requested that carriers curtail non-pay cancellations during the pandemic for at least 90 days. Do you see this issue being extended after the initial 90-day period expires? We did not issue a specific request tied to the number of days. We have issued and kind of continue to believe that carriers should provide whatever flexibilities they can in working with the consumers. Obviously, a number of our areas remain in the red, at least through the end of this week. Some areas are going to be in yellow longer than others, as we already are transitioning over to green. So it's one where we are encouraging you to review kind of the totality of circumstances that your policyholders or prospective policyholders are facing when you're making determinations on how far out to extend your flexibilities. I'll use as an example, at least on the health side, that we are or have heard from carriers that had initially announced telehealth flexibilities and payment flexibilities there for a month or two. They're extending out for in many cases, several more months, even into September in some cases, on making that flexibility available for the members, and to make sure that they have access to those physicians that they had access to in a telehealth environment. So I don't expect to issue anything specific to days and how much longer we expect you to extend. but we would encourage you to kind of consider all of those factors in determining how far out you're comfortable extending the flexibility that you've been providing, and that we do appreciate. Let's see. Whoops. Another question is, with the recent announcement on the 2021 budget, do you see the department making recommendations to raise fees to fund the insurance regulatory and oversight fund? I think to the point that the budget has been extended for 5 years in some departments, special funds in particular, extended out for the full year. I think those conversations in terms of what the next fiscal year budget or the remainder of the fiscal year budget look like are going to be taking place over the next couple of months, in the last several months. We have a question here. Thank you and the rest of PID staff for participating in these calls. You're welcome. We enjoy it as much as you do. They're a great resource for the industry. So we do appreciate that comment. On the rate filing front, I believe I heard it correctly that PID would object to rate increase filings that did not include a pandemic analysis. Will PID be putting out additional guidance as to what information would need to be included in a pandemic analysis as a component part of the rate increase? Now, I'll turn that back over to John and Shannon, just with the preview comment of a number of rate increase, at least one or two that I could think of off the top of my head, use driving data as of 12/31/09. And I think the reason there that an objection would come is that is unrealistic in terms of what driving data looks like over the past couple of months. So yes, we would be sending those back because there's no realization of what the driving records look like today and over the last several months and potentially for the foreseeable future. With that said, I will turn it to John and Shannon about any guidance and additional considerations.
Yeah, so this is John. So at this point, we're not looking to issue any kind of formal guidance. The pandemic analysis aspect of a rate filing, it just goes to our authority and requirements to make sure that rates are not excessive or inadequate. And just given the level of disruption that the pandemic has caused and truly taking things out of the ordinary, we're just looking for something that takes into consideration the fact that these aren't normal times. Driving behavior in 2019 is not indicative of driving behavior in 2020. It's that's just the world we live in right now. And so as Shannon noted earlier, it's not something formal out there. We're not issuing guidance, but what we're looking at is just make sure that you've done some analysis on how this pandemic has affected claims frequency, claims severity, items such as that. Again, we're not saying that we're going to automatically object to any rate increase, but you need to provide us with how is this justified given the fact that folks aren't driving as much or there's not as much commuting. And so that's what we're looking at. To the extent you have questions, reach out to your former rate reviewer and see what they are looking for. Have an open dialogue with us where we can help you understand, here's what we're looking for, here's what we're working with. So when in doubt, give us a call, let us know what you're thinking and how you want to do it, and then we can give you that informal input as to here's what we're kind of looking for. That's all I had. Shannon, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only last thing is just, when you're considering all the filings that are going on, sometimes it's really hard to know what one hand is doing with the other. So we've had insurers, unfortunately, submit premium credit programs, because they're recognizing what's going on in the current environment. And then right behind it is a rate effect that's going to take in, effective 3 to 6 months that's showing a rate increase. So it's just really making sure that you know, when you're looking at the full picture, that you're able to give enough justification for why you think that rate increase is justified. So John, you said it perfect. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you both. Next question. Our company's CLO was never able to locate anything official that Pennsylvania authorized required completion of the NAIC data call. Typically, there is a notice on your website or we receive something indicating the insurance department is directing companies to reply. Did you ever issue a letter or notice? We signed a letter to the NAIC showing that we would be participating. We did not post anything separately on our website. And I'm gonna have to defer to Chris or John in terms of what we have posted in the past. So if either of you have any additional thoughts on that one, other than that we have agreed to issue, and actually it's my understanding that we have not in the past issued notice of data calls. But Chris or John, you'll have more past knowledge than I.
Yeah, this is John, and I'll defer to Chris for the history of how we've gone about this. But I would say, this is a different kind of data call. When we do our own single state data calls, we may issue something there, a notice or something of that nature that kind of lets people know. But this is a nationwide data call, and we have authorized the NAIC to collect this data on our behalf. And so that might be why, there hasn't necessarily been a notice issued in this regard. But, our thought process is that, everyone is very well aware of this, the BI data call. And we've authorized the NAIC to operate, to collect this data on our behalf. So that's kind of where we are. I mean, from a legal standpoint of they are authorized to collect this data, we are participating. And so, you need to participate with the NAIC's BI data call.
Yeah, and this is Chris. I think John's spot on. I don't have anything to add. I mean, as an NAIC data call, they're the ones that have taken the lead on this, but we have authorized the NAIC to collect data on behalf of Pennsylvania.
Very good. Next question is defining the pandemic analysis to be an exhibit that is actuarially certified using acceptable rate-making principles. Shannon, that sounds like one that they're looking for additional feedback from you on.
Yes, I don't have a lot of feedback on that one, but we can certainly try to get back to the group with it.
Sure, and I think part of it is, I mean, we're looking for what you provide to us to be actuarially appropriate in terms of the data that's being used to develop the rate. And to the extent that you're using driving data from 6 months ago, that's no longer realistic of where we are today and over the next couple of months. I think that's why you are getting some questions and objections back in the filing process. I think there's actually a chat question. Actually, nope, we addressed that in terms of questions that had been answered. So give any additional questions that we have from the group, because there are 2 additional questions that remain that have been a consistent theme on whether we're taking positions on business interruption coverage. I don't have anything different to provide to you today than in the past in terms of where the department is and We have no position at this time. Any other questions? Hearing none, I will turn it back over to Ron.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Mike and folks at the department for another insightful discussion. I don't have any closing comments. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Sam Marshall and to kind of end the conversation. And Sam, so it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Mike, the question, and it goes to what we've discussed in the past, and maybe we need your help in having a similar dialogue with another agency, PennDOT. We a lot of auto carriers need the information from PennDOT to process claims, underwrite, just move things along. I guess things are slowly opening up there, but there's a considerable backlog, we believe. And the question is how to wade through that. And if you have any insight on that, I know last time you'd asked for some specifics and we sent some over. But how to, any suggestions and any help you can provide in getting a dialogue with PennDOT to say, here are the combined concerns, and PennDOT, what are your plans for addressing them?
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. And I was hoping to be able to have some additional information for you by the time our call comes off, but we have not heard back yet. So we have already reached out to PennDOT, have posed the questions, and but we'll circle back with you and Ron once we get some feedback.
Okay, that's a biggie from the purely technical end.
Sure.
Okay, Sam. On behalf of both Sam and myself, as well as the department, we want to thank you folks for attending today's call-in. The next call-in is scheduled for June 15th, same time at 3 o'clock. You'll be receiving some email notices about that in the near future. Please be safe out there and stay healthy. Thank you very much.
Thanks.